Hey guys, I'm Tony. Thanks for listening to this channel, and here I'm all about spiritual growth, challenging some of the old mindsets and beliefs that have held us down, and growing our faith so that we can understand, I guess, who God is on a deeper level and who we are in God, like the peace, transcendent peace that we can experience it for ourselves, not just theologically, but down deeper into our hearts where the real action takes place. So I've been talking, this is part two of, I guess, spiritual growth, and one of the things I've noticed is we've come to believe as Christians that spiritual growth is about sort of attendance. Somehow we've likened the two together. We've sort of like, okay, well, if I attend church and I keep up with my Bible study and I read my Bible, semi-regularly, and I sort of say a couple of prayers, and I do this year in, year out, well, I'm going to just keep growing. And while that seems reasonable and may seem realistic, and you might even see some growth in those areas, I'm sure you will, because obviously faithfulness is a big part of any journey that we take. What you'll find is that you sort of only grow to a certain level, right? You'll only go, and growth spiritually is really not about growing up and out, although there's some expansiveness to it, but it's more about growing in, isn't it? Growing deeper within ourselves. So our roots grow deeper, our certainties grow deeper, our hope grows deeper. And funnily enough, there's a lot of unpacking to be done in this growth too, because we also become, while we become more certain, we also become kind of more uncertain as well about other things. Other areas that we had surety about, that we thought were black and white, we begin to see maybe, hang on a minute. As I open myself up to seeing and questioning, I can see that there's more to those things. There's more to those areas than I've seen. In other words, there's a sort of a paradoxical situation where, black is not necessarily black all the time. Sometimes it's black, sometimes it's white, right? And that's not sort of some new age gibberish thing. This is a reality of the spiritual journey. We begin to see. But the certainties I'm talking about are the deep and deeper sureties of who we are. The certainty of my place in God, my place in this world, the things that I have to offer to the world, my gifts that I have to bring. Now, we keep rolling up to these meetings and stuff like that, right? And we're thinking, yes, I'm growing and I'm listening and I'm taking in. But are we? Are we really? Let's have a look at ourselves. Let's ask the question. Okay, let's question ourselves. Firstly, that's, I think, really important about any spiritual growth. We question ourselves. We challenge the beliefs that we've fixed up about ourselves. In other words, we might have patched up our life and said, hey, I'm growing, I'm doing really well, but deep down we're still harboring this deep anger and hatred and bitterness and resentments and fears and doubts and so on and so forth. So growth is about, I guess, releasing, isn't it? It's about coming and becoming more and more certain and, I guess, more at peace in our inner life. Coming to know God on a deeper level, not on a theological level as I shared in the last video, but a more heart level where it's very relational. Jesus becomes our greatest friend. The Spirit is our confidant, the one who walks beside us, the one who closely takes the time to listen, to feed back to us, to show us the way, the one who is our counselor and confidant, who listens to our struggles but also gives us positive and what we might term sometimes negative feedback by going, hey, have a look at yourself, check it out, mate, really get serious. It's like you've got a 24/7 counselor on tap right there. But we haven't realised, because we felt in ourselves that if we just kept going to the meeting and listening to the preach and standing up and, worshipping, nothing wrong with any of those things. They're fantastic in themselves, but they're not the be-all and end-all of spiritual growth. Spiritual growth is a personal journey within your community. I'm not saying it's a one-out thing, it's an actually community journey, but unless you take the time to grow on your own, you can only ever grow this much, because as a community we have to go to the lowest common denominator to some degree. You think about the preach on a Sunday, okay? If I'm a preacher and I'm standing up and talking to 250 people ranging from 12, 13 years of age to 90 years of age who are in all stages of spiritual growth, I have to target my message to encompass as many people as I can, right? Which makes sense, of course it does. And to do that, I have to almost come back to the lowest common denominator, meaning the person at almost the lowest level of spiritual growth, or somewhere in the middle probably would be a better way of putting it. So I've got to come to somewhere in the middle where the person who's young spiritually can grow up to it, but the person who's a bit older can also still relate enough that they think it's worth coming. Now, it's very hard to go beyond that from just a Sunday type service or any large group of people until you get down into deeper stuff. You're never going to grow. So if you just rehash on a Wednesday or a Thursday or a Tuesday the Sunday sermon, guess what? You're still going to that middle ground, lowest common denominator type of scenario, and you're not going to grow to the level that you can by going deeper in, challenging some of the status quo, asking the hard questions like, what does that really mean? How does that affect me right now? Am I actually living out the Christ-like values in my community, in my life? Am I loving like God loves? Am I loving my neighbour as myself? You know what I mean? Like, we can start to question and to think and say, well, how am I going with that? Am I being generous? Am I being kind? Am I being, whatever? Like, one of the biggest challenges to me has been my ability to be generous. Like, I thought I was generous, but I wasn't. It's been challenged so much that, hang on a minute, you're holding to yourself. Why are you holding to yourself? Because you're fearful that there's not enough. So Spirit brings this up for me, and I'm not saying once, I'm talking challenging over years and years and years. You're always afraid that there's not enough, Tony. There's not enough money. There's not enough time. There's not enough energy to go around. And so my generosity was, stunted. So my spiritual growth was stunted in that area of generosity. That's how it works, right? So when we get stunted in certain areas and we sort of don't face them and we just keep taking on more stuff without facing the realities of those areas of our life that aren't working, we don't grow in that area. And so we just sort of compartmentalise it. We put it into a box and I'll get back to that. Can I ask you, when was the last time you got back to one of those boxes? How many boxes have you got in the shed? How many boxes have you got in your heart? How many places have you sort of stacked away? I'll get back to that, I'll get back to that. But then there's this distraction, the work, the family, the time, the sport, the money, the lack of money, the sickness, the blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on, doesn't it? Happens to me all the time. So easily distracted, so easily. How do we grow? We've got to keep taking on the challenges. The pruning I was talking about in the last video. The pruning of the tree for fruitfulness. The boughs must be cut back each season so that next time there's more room for fruitfulness. Things grow old. What worked for one day, what was a very solid and healthy branch bearing mangoes, lychees, oranges, limes, this season's getting a bit old. It's a bit too woody. It's not going to be able to hold a really strong lot of fruit. It needs to be cut off. Is that you? Maybe you've been holding on to this sort of church, this place, this thing that you've been doing, and you felt that, it was really used to be so fruitful. Like, I've been here for 30 years, man. It's been so fruitful. But it's not feeling that fruitful anymore. Maybe it's time to cut it off. Maybe it's time to grow in another area and to challenge yourself to stretch out further, and to stretch and to take in the bigger story and to go, what's next for me, God? Is there something I've been missing? Have I just gone for faithfulness over growth? Have I gone for loyalty over, stretching out to encompass further and greater things in my life? Yes, it's great to be loyal and faithful. I'm not knocking that. But what I'm saying is, if you're doing that to the detriment of your spiritual growth, that's not good for you. It's not healthy. To just sort of hold on with a kind of white knuckle grip to what used to work is not submitting ourselves to the gardener. As we give ourselves to the gardener, there's this beautiful flow and this beautiful energy that comes into the new branches, new shoots come up. So there's a new and revitalized energy and power and passion again that we may not have had. Used to be talked about, you've lost your first love. I think that was the terminology. Well, I think it's because we don't get continually pruned, and the first love was that new growth that shot out when we first came to know and understand Christ. And then it's sort of over time, it becomes old and a bit gnarled. Check out these branches here. Classic example, right? Look at this. This is a classic example. They get old, then the wind comes and just snaps it straight off, right? So it's like that for us. Things that once worked, maybe not working so much. To grow spiritually, we're going to need to, allow ourselves to be pruned. We are co-creators with God. We enter into the pruning. We can resist the pruning, sure. it's no problem. You can resist the pruning all you like. You're totally an individual. You can make your choices, and that's up to you. Or if you're here and listening to these videos because you want to grow and you want to be challenged, that's what's happening, okay? To look at the things that are happening in your life, that's what's going on. I'm going to talk about that a bit more in the next video, perhaps. That's what's happening now, right? There's some sort of a pruning process going on, and the dramas, the struggles, the relational breakdowns, the push against you from the group that you're in. You're questioning, and they're going, hey man, that doesn't fit that well with us here. I'm not sure that you're going to be that welcome here. Maybe they're not saying that in words, but that's the feeling. If that's you, you're growing, and it's good. It's challenging to grow. It feels, it's kind of be painful in a sense, but also liberating and freeing, and brings back new passion and vitality. So we'll talk about that a bit more in the next video, but I'll catch you on the other side. If you like this video, please just give us a like, hit subscribe, share it with your friends. I would really appreciate it if you would, because if this sort of stuff gets out and people start challenging and growing, we can really start changing the world one person at a time. It can really work, honestly. One person changes, everyone around them can feel the impact of that change. So let's be life, and again, as the new shoots come out, and we look forward to a greater season of fruitfulness next year. Thanks for listening.